Estremera and Legal Aid Society in Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Overwear, the Raza Executive Board, and your representative on the High Speed Rail, Department of General Services and Caltrans.
I'll be Lobos, retired probation department and member of the GI Forum and former commander of the San Jose GI Forum.
Richard Santos, Director of Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Luis Ramirez, I'm a dreamer and I'm studying to be a doctor.
Danny Garza, Chapter Chair, MAPA, Mexican-American Political Association.
Eddie Garcia, Acting Chief of Police.
Janina Espinosa, Evergreen Valley College faculty.
Kimberly Tapia, Treasurer of the Enlace Student Association.
Maribel Martinez, County of Santa Clara, Office of LGBTQ Affairs.
Jenny Meehan, Executive Board with the Raza Roundtable, on the board with San Jose Evergreen Community College District, and with the SBDC San Jose Silicon Valley Chapter Hispanic Chamber.
Ron Resendez, Santa Clara County Planning Commission, and also a member of the San Jose Police Chief Advisory Board.
Linda Ramirez Jones, Community, and also with Latinas for Isa Herrera for Assembly.
Mario Lopez, Policy Aid to Board President Dave Cortese.
Kieran Kelly, Aid to Supervisor Ken Yeager.
I'm Juan Uranga. I'm a farm worker attorney from Salinas, but I'm here tonight because I'm Ana Caballero's husband.
Guillermo Franco, legal specialist with KMBS.
Jesus Nava with the Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Jose Posadas, writer for Vision Magazine.
Good evening, Joshua Bruce, candidate for San Jose City Council in District 8. Good to be back.
Louis Maroney, intern at the Public Defender's Office and volunteer for Josh Baruz.
Ruben Abrica, council member in East Palo Alto and instructor at Fianza Community College.
Santiago Martinez, co-chair of Mecha de Palomar College.
Fabiola Hernandez, Education Chair of Mecha at Palomar College.
Cristina Flores Lopez, student at Cal State San Marcos.
I'm Luis Michelle, general member.
I'm Elizabeth Moreno, and I'm a student from Cal State San Marcos.
Saul Cigarroa, college student.
Hector Galvez, student at Cal State San Marcos.
Abraham Garcia, I'm a student at Palomar Mechista.
Frank Reese, California Scenes TV show, Channel 15, and A Best DJs Karaoke.
Frank Espinosa, faculty member with the Enlace program at Evergreen Valley College.
And it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce to you this very renowned and difference maker for the state of California. He was the 68th Speaker of the California Assembly. And you should know that as soon as you become the Speaker of the Assembly, you become one of the three most powerful political figures in the state of California. And that's what he became when he became the Speaker. In 30 previous years, the state had not been able to approve a balanced budget and an on-time budget. Under his leadership, we were able to do that 3 years in a row. You can't get a piece of legislation through the legislature unless you have the blessing of the Speaker of the Assembly. One of his most significant pieces of legislation was the Middle Class Scholarship Act, because that provided, and the Mecha students, should be very proud that he was able to do this, because it provided tuition relief for middle class, for students who are going to the universities, and it gives them relief with their tuition costs. Given that the state is already a majority of Latinos in the state, we're going to need more and more and more Latino college graduates. And it was his forward-thinking, significant legislation that's going to make that possible for thousands of Latino students in the future to be able to afford a college education. He has been appointed as a member of the Board of Regents, so he will now provide oversight and guidance to the UC Berkeley system, the UC system, and the California State University system So he will continue to be a significant leader in the state of California, the Honorable John Perez.
Joe Cotto will always be my chairman. Victor, I want to thank you for allowing me to spend some time, and I want to thank Pete for helping us coordinate all the logistics. Joe Cotto was just such an amazing member of the legislature that I had the honor to work with, and Ana Caballero, who hopefully will be back in the legislature soon, was another amazing leader, not only as a city council member, as an assembly member, but as a cabinet secretary for the state of California at an incredible time. And my friends Dave Cortese and Ken Yeager have been just amazing stewards for this county, which really helps lead so much of the discussion that we need to have as a state of California. But I was invited tonight to talk a little bit about higher education and where we are, and I think it's a critical discussion for us to be having right now. And I don't want to get overtly partisan, but I'm delighted to see that both Democratic presidential candidates have put forward transformative changes to higher education as centerpieces of their campaigns. Now, I mention this to illustrate a larger point. Set aside the candidates themselves for a moment, or the odds of passage through a hostile Congress, or the price tag for some of the ideas that they've put forward. But let's just focus on the substance of the ideas that these two candidates put forward. One proposal is sweeping: free college for everyone. It flows logically from the belief that higher education is a right, and that our present system of higher education denies too many Americans, and let's be clear, especially too many Latinos, the right to appreciate that right to higher education. The other proposal is a little more focused. It's debt-free tuition for every student, a position that also logically flows from a belief that higher education is an investment in success for the future. As a regent of the University of California, I'm someone who also attended UC Berkeley. As somebody who went to school on a Pell Grant, I can tell you this: both candidates are right. Higher education, and more broadly, the opportunities that come from attending colleges, universities, trade schools, art academies, any institute that imparts knowledge, skills, and wisdom, is, I believe, the right of every American. And higher education, no matter what form, is an investment in the success of the future. An investment that over the life of a person yields higher wages, better health and healthcare coverage, a more realistic shot at attaining the American dream. Both of these Democratic candidates are right, and they need to go further. Colleges and universities serve a social good. They're perhaps the only place in American life today where all roads to varying degrees intersect, where the wealthy and the workers of all races, religions, gay, straight, are all together in one place. It's an incredibly important reality for our democracy because it exposes everyone to the values and worldviews that are different from their own. Life on a university focuses you to consider the world beyond your own conception of it, and that's a powerful social good in and of itself. Now, all of these statements are true in the abstract. College is a powerful social good. A higher education dramatically improves your odds of having a comfortable quality of life, and that comfortable quality of life, or at least the educational foundation thereof, fundamentally should be a right for every American. By that standard, we've been failing as a state and as a nation for far too long. UCs and CSUs and community colleges are the most visible examples of what gridlock and dysfunction has resulted in when they take root in the challenges we've seen in state government. It took us many years of concerted work with Governor Brown to dig ourselves out of the hole, to remove the choke points that Joe referred to that kept us from fixing the underlying fiscal problems. And I was very happy to see this America Saves document and the reference to a rainy day individually. As the author of the state's rainy day fund, I know that what's true for individual families is also true for our state, and it's been a key part of our recovery. completing the turnaround that we've been engaged in, getting us back to where the California Master Plan of Higher Education envisioned for the future of the state of California, will require several more years of concerted action by all of us. And it will require a global approach to address the multipolar nature of this debate. By that, I mean that you can't focus on accessibility at the exclusion of affordability. And you can't talk about quality of life on campuses without addressing the needs for professors, staff, faculty, and students. Success in higher education reform requires one eye firmly focused on the big picture, while the other is firmly focused on the specific objectives in front of you. And I believe that the middle class scholarship, which Joe talked about, is a textbook example of how we can make progress on both levels. From a broad viewpoint, the middle class scholarship served a purpose far beyond making college more affordable for the broad swath of the California population. It was a demonstration of our determination to renew the spirit and the letter of the California Master Plan for Higher Education. A decade of budget instability followed by global financial calamity had the consequences of doubling the cost of college for in-state students, and it moved us dramatically away from the guarantees of free education. When Governor Brown took office, my colleagues and I finally had a partner who was seriously involved in solving these problems and the conditions in our education system. As we approached the 50th anniversary for the Master Plan for Higher Education in 2012, student fees had doubled, and our former colleague, Ira Ruskin, who we remember, really led the discussion about us recommitting ourselves to that vision. A student graduating from UC or CSU was graduating with thousands of dollars in debt. Classes had been restricted, faculty and staff had been limited, graduate schools only had additional pressures on them. And all of this was taking place as we struggled to close a massive multi-billion-dollar deficit in the general fund. When we introduced the middle class scholarship, we were sending a signal that higher education in California had hit rock bottom and we were going to rebuild. That the wealthiest and most fortunate were able to afford to pay these higher fees. And because of the work of Ana and Joe and myself and our colleagues, we were able to protect the Cal Grant system from attacks so that the neediest in California were taken into account. This was a key fight with then Governor Schwarzenegger, who wanted to eliminate Cal Grant and eliminate access for working class kids to go to our public universities. And the three of us and our colleagues stood firm and challenged the governor and passed the latest budget in the history of the state of California because it was a 105-day fight to make sure Arnold Schwarzenegger understood what was at stake for the future of the state of California. And despite all odds, together we prevailed and we saved Cal Grants because we knew they were a non-negotiable element of our values. When we came together to make this change in policy with respect to middle class students, we did it by directly engaging students in the discussion, by organizing students on every UC and CSU campus, by getting them involved not only in the legislative discussion, but getting them to understand the political power they had by being involved in the political process as well. The first iteration of our idea was to close a loophole that only benefited out-of-state corporations, a loophole that would allow us to invest $1 billion back in public higher education. We passed it through the Assembly, and unfortunately in the final days, the Senate was unable to muster the votes. And instead of being dejected, we brought students together at 11:45 that night as the Senate left session and said this was a setback, but it wasn't a defeat. And we thought we'd have to encourage them to stay involved in the fight. Not the case at all. They understood the difference between a setback and a defeat and were key in moving forward to the success we later had the next year. But they also were engaged in the discussion about broad-based resources for the state and were a key constituency in passing Props 30 and 39, making sure that our state could recover as a whole, and that made possible the ability for us to push back on the rhetoric espoused by our opponents and the belief of many pundits who said California would never directly vote for a tax increase as we did in Prop 30. that we'd never close a loophole as we did in Prop 39, and that the Democrats in the Assembly could never reach a supermajority. Well, they said we couldn't get to 54, we did them one better and got to 55. And on each of their predictions, we proved them wrong because we came together. Now, the challenge is how we move from where we are today to make sure that we build on the success. As the state continues to recover from the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, increased revenues have to be reinvested in education at all levels. We began that work at the K through 12 level, but we haven't yet done as well in reinvesting in public higher education. That is a challenge we all have to undertake together. As you heard, when you look at the changing demographics of the state of California, it is disproportionately Latino students who get impacted when our colleges are underfunded and where there aren't spaces. And this is where both the Assembly and the Senate, after I left office last year, came together to extract for 10,000 new spots for in-state students at UC and a comparable number at CSU. This is the beginning of reinvestment in public higher education. Another element of that is making sure that the footprint of our higher education system is seen throughout the state of California. It is by that same spirit of coming together that we see the possibility of having first a satellite and potentially a full UC campus here in the Silicon Valley, because we understand that true access and affordability also have to be paired with proximate opportunities to take advantage of those opportunities. We have to keep up our efforts on our campuses, in our policy discussions, in our civic discussions, but I am confident that together we can do all these things. Thank you so much.
As you know, both candidates on the Democratic side are pushing for affordable college tuition. I'd like to remind you and the rest of the audience that in 1968, when I went to UC Berkeley, there was no tuition. This charge that one of the candidates is eating pie in the sky is bull, because it was tuition-free then, and we should get back to that. The other thing is, when I was there, I was involved in some student movement that created the Ethnic Studies program. And I just became aware, and I hadn't heard anything about it until I saw it posted, that the Ethnic Studies program, the Chicano program, has been eliminated. Would you please look into that?
One, you're right, that until the 1980s, we truly promised free public higher education in California. That began to change post-1978 with Prop 13, and we never backfilled the resources that have been going to higher education. So there's been a steady decline in that investment. The steepest portion of that was during the Great Recession, and there's a beginning of a reinvestment. I voted against reclassifying fees as tuition because I thought in so doing we walked away from the promise of trying to get back to free provision of education, and that's a conversation I'm very involved in. With respect to the third world strikes both at Berkeley and at San Francisco State, which laid the foundation for the creation of Chicano studies and ethnic studies programs throughout UCs and CSUs, that was a pivotal moment to change the face of public higher education more than anything else. It is at San Francisco State, a CSU which I don't have authority for, that there's now an effort to use previous year's budget deficits as an excuse to reduce the funding for the program by 30%. We've been engaged in some conversations about what support work we can do, but it's focused right now at one campus, San Francisco State, which the regents have no jurisdiction over. That's the CSU Board of Trustees, but it's something I think we collectively need to continue to be engaged in. Yeah, there's been a conversation about first starting with a partnership to create a satellite here with the objective of, as UC expands, having the Silicon Valley be a potential location for an 11th campus. These are very long-range conversations. There's some immediate discussions around a satellite program, much as there's a satellite operation being planned and about to open up in Richmond, California, associated with the Berkeley campus. There have been conversations about having a similar approach in Silicon Valley.
Former Speaker.
and now region. My question to you is, I got lost a little bit on the rhetoric when you were talking about the different things that you're involved in, and et cetera, et cetera. But I have a direct question in that it is obvious to everyone that we are losing ground, Latinos are losing ground in terms of being educated, higher education, and Asians are going up. That's fine. But I didn't hear any one specific thing that you yourself are committed to making a change.
If we don't have the funding to have students in the door, that means none of our kids are getting the education. So the first thing that you heard me talk about was funding. When Joe talked about the budget, for example, the first benefit of passing those 3 on-time balanced budgets in a row was that we improved the creditworthiness of the state of California, which had been the lowest of any state in the country. When we had 3 successive improvements in our creditworthiness, it saved us enough money to reinvest $250 million in public higher education, which actually did result in an expansion not only in student admissions in our campuses, but specifically Latino student admissions, both at UC and CSU. There are some areas of limitation because the voters in Prop 209 took away some of the tools that we've had. So I've been involved in creating some public-private partnership work, been working, for example, with Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, and Caltech to take advantage of federal grant money plus private money to increase the number of Black and Latino students getting into STEM education programs at both undergraduate and graduate level. The big challenge also right now is the legislature is leveraged for 10,000 new spots. That means that we're going to have to make sure that we get at least our fair share of those spots, one, but the 578 new faculty members that have to be hired to serve that expanded population of students better start looking more like the state of California. The reality is UC faculty is roughly 4.2% Latino, 4.2%. 1.3% African American. This week, the Chronicle of Higher Education put out a study of nationwide numbers, and guess what? The nationwide numbers look exactly like ours, so you could say, well good, we're not doing any worse than anybody else. With the population of California, it is inexcusable that our numbers are as bad as the rest of the country. We ought to be leading the way, and so now we're having a conversation about how we change the evaluative process to figure out that faculty, which will also have the indirect benefit in terms of what we do in terms of populating our student populations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. The last time I was here, you'll remember that I was the Secretary of Business, Consumer Services, and Housing, and I came to talk to you about affordable housing, an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. And the bottom line on that issue is that the state of California is 1 million housing units behind. If you built them tomorrow, we would have families to move into them. And so we have a significant crisis, and I know here in the Silicon Valley Leadership Group has identified housing as the #1 priority to resolve because it has a direct impact on the economy and whether people can afford to live in this community and work in the community. And if they can't, then they move further and further away. And we have people driving all the way to Los Baños in order to be able to afford a house and commuting here every day. What that means is that they're not home for the after-school activities of their children, and they're not the coaches for their kids' activities as well. And so you end up with the social issues related to people not living close to where their work is located. And so the whole issue of creating transportation routes so people that can live in the community that they work in, as well as affordable housing, is going to be critically important in our community. So that's actually, I thoroughly enjoyed working for the governor. I served as a cabinet member, and I enjoyed it tremendously. But what I realized is, #1, is that I missed living in Salinas, and I missed spending as much time with my husband as we normally did. #1, and #2, that there was an opportunity to go home. The assembly seat is an open seat. To go home and to finish the job that I had started there a number of years ago. And so I quit my job with the governor and I'm now back at home running for the State Assembly to be able to take what I've learned working within the administration and apply it as an assembly member to creating the opportunities to be able to do things a little bit differently. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to take my practical experience working as a secretary and use it wisely during the last 2 years of Governor Brown's administration. Because the great thing is when you work with someone, you get to see a little bit how they think. And so I'm going to be able to take what I learned about working with Governor Brown to Sacramento and make an impact on our community. And so look forward to having you visit me in Sacramento, and look forward to coming back again and talking a little bit about it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Volando con la brisa va, volando con la brisa va, volando con las blancas nubes blancas que vienen y van. Sus manos se abran al pasar, sus manos se abran al pasar, sus manos como dos palomas, palomas de paz. Y la gente, la gente que la ve volar, dice vente, 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 que todos queremos a la libertad. Hermanos que andan por allá, hermanos que andan por allí, debemos de buscar